Chris, that intro never gets old. What's going on, people? We're back. It's another episode of the Talkin TV podcast. End of January wrap-up episode overall. Chris, I don't know about you, but I was coming off of a very strange weekend overall after a very just strange rest of my week, kind of a big transition week for me personally. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Yeah, last weekend was a bit strange. We got more WandaVision, which in and of itself is just strange. And yeah, it was a strange weekend. Football team I really like lost. It wasn't a terrible weekend, just a lot of like not cool things happened. But
yeah, I mean, I can't say that Bills fans should be too disappointed, but considering just how used to it they've been. But at the same time, like, it definitely is a little bit unsatisfying when it's like, man, they had their moment. Even if it was only for like a split second. Are you actually surprised that I'm able to like engage in sports dialogue with you?
I was surprised first of all, I'm surprised you knew it was the Bills. But I will say this to all my fellow Bills fans. We were top 4 this year. That's huge.
Yes, you were.
Out of 32 teams, we made it to the top 4.
Yeah, but instead, unfortunately, going to the Super Bowl, it's Tom Brady versus who? Like, who's the other big football player that they said?
Patrick Mahomes, the young star, the next Tom Brady, if you will.
Got it. Okay, so it's Brady versus younger Brady. Got it. Now I know how to specifically advertise it.
And you know Tom Brady. Wow, the things you learn.
I do. He's been in too many media properties. He actually is one of my favorite frequent cameos in Entourage. So, yeah, I'm a little bit too used to that. People, we're following up last week, and I will say that despite my previous statements that television, to me, did indeed top movies in 2020, the one thing I will say is that, look, it's been slim pickings this past year as far as movie went. Chris could certainly attest to that. A lot of other people can. But the one thing I will say is that I'm still very, very proud of my list. I'm very happy with some of the movies that I saw, some last-minute entries that I was just able to have an absolute gaga time with. And, Chris, before we kind of get going with this, I wanted to ask, we kind of touched on this last weekend, but what did you think of just cinema and movies in 2020?
So it's strange. And again, guys, hence the TV nerd. I'm trying to teach Dom some things, and he's definitely taught me a lot of things in regards to the movie realm. So from someone who I would say is not still the most experienced movie watcher, again, just being honest with you guys, I did really think, though, out of my knowledge, and thankfully film school helped a lot, sort of cramming in a bunch of movies over time and learning about people. I thought 2019 was an exceptional year. I thought there was a lot of talent. We had a lot of big name directors drop films that they lived up to the name, which is always something you like to see, especially when you have sort of people that have been around for a while, like Scorsese and Tarantino, to name a few. And you had some amazing surprises in there, like Parasite, which completely blew everyone out of the water, I believe. And of course, 1917, which was an awesome film. So, I do feel that overall, though, even the films that were in like the 20s and the 30s out of all the movies I've seen, I think that they were more quality than 2020. But honestly, I think that this top 5 of 2020 for me is special. To be honest, like it is there are some really good movies. Yeah, because
top 10. Oh,
because
man,
like
sorry.
I'm just trying to show how thin it is. You know what I mean? Like there's all still good movies, but
yeah, it was a thin year to say the least. Again, just for sheer lack of availability and because of the coronavirus and everything. You and I were unfortunately not able to get together and go to as many movies kind of to end the year that we did last year. We got a few in, but unfortunately not as many as we may have wanted to. Some movies also that we watched together that you were not as big a fan of as I was. But overall, I just found that kind of the surprise for me for 2020 was, again, extreme slim pickings as opposed to all the movies that I was able to see last year. But at the very least, I will say that specifically for these 10 movies that we're each about to go through, they were each able to kind of give me something unique as far as kind of perspective maybe that I didn't have before. This is, I feel like, a very definitive year for a lot of people, to say the least. And I will say that the movies on this list both were, I thought, great reflections of their time, great art, still had some absolutely incredible things to say, and also were just entertaining. I was thoroughly entertained by every single movie that is on my list. I don't know if you could say exactly the same, but
it is. I'd say really once you get outside of my top 12, a lot of these were hard to sit through. And even though like I like in my top 10, like I like these movies a lot, I would say I only really love my top 5 though.
Got it.
And I think it's in the order it's in is very, not that it's not deliberate in past, rankings, but if it ever held a meaning, 1 through 10 that is, or rather 10 through 1 as we chronologically go up or work backwards, the meaning is the strongest here than it's been for me on this channel so far. So
Definitely, yeah. And
unpack that as you will, guys.
at the very least, look, we could say that we're here to talk about some good movies overall. I just wanted to give a shout out to a couple of other people, specifically Luke of Luke Reviews, because, dude, look, all I'm going to say about Tenet is that Tenet I was finally able to squeeze out of my top 10 list because I feel like that would have just been wrong. I don't know. I enjoyed that movie, I feel like, a lot more than a lot of other people did, but I feel like personally that would have just been wrong for me to put it in the top 10. I just got to preface with that. But props to Luke, sticking with his guns, sticking with his boy Nolan, because Tenet was his #1 favorite movie of the year. And, oh, man, that's just awesome on so many different levels. Yeah. I still like it better than Inception, but yeah, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Tenet for, again, trying to stick to the guns of the original theatrical model, just showing how that was just not opportune at all during the pandemic, but still being a pretty entertaining movie once, you get past the gusto of just the movie itself. Chris will be able to tell you guys all about that at some point in the next week because, oh boy, I
haven't seen it yet, but we have something special planned for you guys.
Oh yes, yeah. There was a very big reason why we deliberately withheld it from this list because man, that's all I gotta say. So, Chris, without further ado, with what's it called? Also, good on you for giving Stranger Boy a shout out. So, you want to into these lists?
Yeah, man. I think now's the time, right?
Yes. All right. So you went first last week, so I'm gonna go first this week. We'll cover our honorable mentions, obviously, in between 2 and 1, like we did last time. So, to start off with my number 10, which is a movie that was I said today it was the second to last movie that we saw in theaters pre-COVID, but it turns out that it was actually the third to last because I also ended up seeing The Hunt after the week after Onward came out in theaters. I told my parents, I'm like, look, the theaters will be closed by next week. I am going to spend my last weekend if possible in a movie theater. However, my number 10 is not The Hunt, although I do think that was a rather entertaining and kind of underrated and misunderstood movie. Of course, written by your boys, Damon Lindelof and Nick Cuse. But no, my number 10 is, I personally think, the greatest experience that we both had in the movie theater this year, that being The Invisible Man. Lee Winnell and Blumhouse's latest adaptation and kind of new traversing into the Monsterverse, which was largely killed by only one movie with Alex Kurtzman and Universal The Mummy. But leave it to Blumhouse to take their tiny budget, and again, only 2 weeks after we saw Fantasy Island, which is just like one of the best comedies that I saw of this past year, were we able to get a taut, tense thriller that involved Elizabeth Moss managing to escape her extremely stalkerish and controlling boyfriend, and also got back to the root of what good horror movies are supposed to do, which is be message movies, but not like super obnoxious and in your face. The performances are really good. The technicals I thought were awesome. This movie gave us chills and thrills and just straight up moments that I don't think were able to be equaled by any other movie this year. There's one particular scene that happens in a diner where both of our jaws were like on the floor and we were staring at each other. And the ending, again, Blumhouse has hinted at their coming Universal Monsters movie. Again, you got Karen Kusama's Dracula, and the Russos are directing this movie, The Gray Man, and I think someone's trying to produce a Wolfman movie with Ryan Gosling. This just opened all the doors for them. But this movie, at the very least, was kind of able to get back to the root of what was missing from that god-awful Mummy movie, that being the horror element, and it was just a really freaking awesome, tense, interesting movie. It was the most fun that I had in a movie theater this year. And I don't want Elizabeth Moss to be completely forgotten by when Carrie and Frances come to dominate in the awards run. But yeah, number 10, Invisible Man.
Yeah, no, it's a solid choice, man. I that was a fun time. It's so crazy to think how long ago that feels.
Almost a year ago.
Crazy.
Almost a year ago in a couple weeks. That's nuts.
Insane. So this next movie, I guess, sort of speaking of the pandemic and talking about how, and this isn't what you have seen on your list that I sent you, by the way. This is something that I went to my notes. I remembered I made a more poignant list for this. So I guess it's a bit of a surprise for you. But I talked to you ad nauseum about this film when I watched it. It was bred out of necessity to create under the pandemic. They shot this film entirely over Zoom, which is so impressive because it's so gripping and it's so telling of how people react and find a way to make the best of a bad situation. My 10th film of 2020 is Host, which is a Shudder original of all places. It's essentially, the story is these people are, just trying to keep human interaction in their lives under the lockdown of COVID-19, the pandemic. And so they have these weekly Friday night Zoom calls, and they'll have like their happy hours. They'll all talk about an album they listen to. They tried the book club. They're getting exhausted of not being able to see each other in person because it's gone on for some time at this point in the movie. And so they need something to spice things up. So one of the girls finds a psychic, and they decide to see if this medium can bring a little fun into their lives. And all hell breaks loose. It is shot all off of laptop cameras and webcams, and it's very, very impressive because it really feels like you're any other B horror film, shaky, messy, but it has that charm, that reason you love those messy horror films. And not at any point in this time do you think you're watching something that isn't a B horror film. You don't think you're watching some webcam experiment. You don't think you're watching some, zeitgeist moment movie that's only good because of now. No, you're just watching a good movie. And so it's really, I love these positive messages that you can get out of a terrible year of 2020. I think it's only fitting to put it in this list because of that. I also think it's hilarious that they made such a horrific movie out of a necessity to create art in 2020 that also ties into the year. But above all, it's a good movie. So yeah, number 10, Host. If you got Shudder, check it out. If not, when Halloween rolls around, you guys all resubscribe to that service because they only make money like 1 or 2 months a year. Watch this one. It's really worth the watch.
Definitely. Yeah. Now, real quick before we go on, so would you preface this? So are you just so I get this right? Are you saying that this is a legitimately good movie, or are you saying that this is a movie that's like kind of just really, really enjoyable, despite its cheapness?
It's just another legitimately good B horror movie.
All right.
And some of those movies are my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah.
So it
Well,
really
I know
fits
for a
my
fact.
taste. Sorry, what were you saying?
No, I was gonna say because I know for a fact that one is definitely gonna be on your list later on.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's and I know exactly what you're talking about. That's
Yeah,
too funny.
do.
People are going to be shocked with my list, I suppose. But
I can't wait.
I'm keeping it true to myself, and that's why Host's on here. Hey, Stranger Boy's doing his top 10 counting
Yes,
down
definitely.
with us again
So
this
his
week.
number 10, Christmas Chronicles 2. Nice. I did not end up watching this one, even though I greatly enjoyed the first one. And Stranger Boy, I'm just saying right now, you better count down the whole list time because you said you were going to count down the list with us last time, and you totally bailed on us. So better not do that tonight. Better not.
We want to see it, dude. We want to see what you got.
Definitely.
Anyways, Dom, let's move on to number 9, yeah?
Yeah, my number 9. So like I said, I did a lot of rearranging before I went in. Again, just like the problem was, again, not quite the same amount of dilemma that I had with the TV show list where it's like, damn, these are all bangers. Much more so a matter of, okay, just figuring out kind of which ones I liked more. And this one movie was a movie, it's the most recent entry on this list. It was a movie that definitely probably didn't give, I think, the sufficient amount of thought process to the first time that I watched it. But that being said, this is still an absolutely incredible feat of filmmaking. And also, again, wanted to give shout out to a certain creator that actually managed to make his way into 2 entries on this list, that being Kemp Powers, who co-wrote a later entry on my list, as well as this movie that I have, which is One Night in Miami, Regina King's directorial debut, which depicts the meeting of incredibly huge black icons, Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Jim Brown, and Sam Cooke in a shortly after Muhammad Ali's defeating of, I believe it was, let me check because I am really, really bad with sports history. It's like the most famous first victory that Muhammad Ali had. And I'm slowly talking in order to... Sonny Liston, that's right. Sonny Liston. Man, I did a great job covering for myself there. And they end up meeting, and what starts as kind of an attempt by Malcolm to kind of get the others to understand kind of their place as far as, history in America, considering the fact that this comes at an incredibly crucial point, a turning point in American history, specifically for African Americans. But it ends up kind of evolving into something completely else, which is that kind of all 4 of them coming to an understanding about kind of their position and what they actually mean to the history of America versus what they perceive. It kind of gets into everything that's going on with each one of them in their personal lives. Jim, obviously, in his transition from sports to acting, and Malcolm, obviously, is on the outs with the Nation of Islam, right when, of course, Muhammad Ali, known then as Cassius Clay, is beginning his transition into the Nation of Islam. It's really, really interesting. It's a really different type of a movie. It can be a little bit wordy at points. Like, there's very, very minimalistic locations, so it kind of plays into kind of like the same subgenre as Fences and then Ma Rainey's Black Bottom recently. But it's a really interesting take on kind of African Americans coming to terms with the position that they hold in this country and the position that they've had in history, and kind of what kind of just bringing out the different idea of black celebrity and everything involved with that. And it was really, really interesting. It was definitely a different type of a movie than I've seen before, and all four of the actors that they got here were absolutely incredible. Eli Goree as Muhammad Ali, Kingsley Ben-Adir as Malcolm X, Aldous Hodge as Jim Brown, and the soon-to-be Oscar-nominated Leslie Odom Jr. as as Sam Cooke. It was really, really engaging. The dialogue was smart and snappy. The characters were all incredibly engrossing. The performances, again, beyond incredible. And again, Regina shoots this like a pro. I can tell that she's paying homage to some of the best auteurs that have come before her. And yeah, it's awesome. It's on Amazon. I highly recommend it to anyone that just wants something different as far as a new movie to watch. So that's my number 9, One Night in Miami.
Yeah, I can't wait to get to that one, man. It's just been so busy lately, but
Yeah, I
I promise you guys it's on my list, and I do plan to be able to at least speak about it when it comes up on the channel in the future. What's up, Matt? Basic Entertainment, shout out. You'll be on our Friday night WandaVision watch along. It's going to be good to have you on the channel again, man.
Definitely.
And so, yeah, number 9 for me was a movie that actually kind of has grown on me a little bit because it wasn't in my top 10, and then I kind of shook some things around, just revising it earlier today, and I was like, it feels wrong to not have this movie on my top 10. So I'm just going to jump in and tell you guys what it is. At number 9, I have Not One Night in Miami, On the Rocks.
Nice.
Yeah. It was I guess the bar is always so high when it comes to A24 that the fact that this didn't have that initial sort of wow factor that most of their movies, even some of their most abstract or avant-garde films do, doesn't mean it wasn't a bad movie. In fact, I actually thought it was like a really nice father-daughter story. And it's just a really nice movie. There's a happy ending. It all works out. And it's rare that you get those movies in ways that are actually charming and not corny or not full of themselves. And I liked that. I liked how real it felt, because sometimes things do work out and we don't always have to have something dark and twisted. On top of the fact that I thought everyone really worked in their roles. Like, Bill Murray's awesome in this movie. Like you said to me, he's the reason you watch this film. I mean, he's just only getting better with age. It's Bill Murray. Who doesn't love Bill Murray? You're going to watch a Bill Murray movie, even if it's like the dumbest thing marketed you've ever heard of. You're going to watch it. And this is one of his better watches that I've seen, at least in quite some time. Dare I say, since Osmosis Jones. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, it was.
What do you mean you haven't seen any of the Wes Anderson movies he's put out in like the last 20 years?
No, I've seen. I think I've seen one or two. I'm just kidding, anyways. But I did enjoy it a lot. It was a good time. And what can I say? It's a nice little cutesy little family movie. And sometimes in 2020, especially, you need those. So
yeah.
I appreciate it for what it was, and it was definitely worthy of being in the top 10. But again, it's not in my top 5. It's in my lower half of the top 10. So, anyways.
That movie was refreshing to me at a time when I really needed it. I really needed something to kind of sit, chill back, relax to. And Sofia Coppola, to me, has never been the most engaging of directors, but she definitely kind of knows how to present what's it called, the kind of underlying human emotions through subtlety. Only in this case, just having Bill Murray basically be like the most gonzo, extravagant, over the top, just like charmer, just charming absolutely everyone, while also just being so incredibly full of himself at the same time. Murray, it's like you said, Murray is the reason to watch that movie.
Exactly.
I'd say the only movie that she really doesn't accomplish that in is The Bling Ring, which I just recently watched, but more on that one later. Real quick, so shout out to Stranger Boy, whose number 9 is Phineas and Ferb, Candace Against the Universe. They made another Phineas and Ferb movie? Didn't that show end like 3 years ago?
That's too many.
They're still making content with that?
Like, I mean, hey, if it's good, it's good, but
yeah.
Not my Phineas and Ferb.
Definitely not. It will never be our Phineas and Ferb. Yeah. Moving on. Number 8. My number 8 is a movie that I know for a fact you famously did not like when we watched this movie. It was a subject of, I would say, probably our first big disagreement as far as podcasts go. But I still love this movie because this movie is directed by one of my absolute favorite new filmmakers. I can't wait to see what he does next. The minute that I heard this guy was doing a movie with Hugh Jackman, I'm like, sign me up. I don't even care. And then the movie to me absolutely held up afterwards. That is Bad Education, directed by Corey Finley. At the time, I was pissed that this was going directly to HBO, and then that ended up being a blessing in disguise, considering that not only was this, one of the few movies I was able to see in the first third of the year before movies started progressively coming back over the summer, it actually, to me, was one of the most entertaining watches of the year. It depicts the story of the Roslyn high school scandal of the early 2000s, in which school superintendent Frank Tassone and assistant superintendent Pam Gluckin, portrayed respectively by Hugh Jackman and Allison Janney, ended up covertly stealing and grifting millions of dollars from the school, and kind of the fallout that erupted from it. This movie, once again, shows Finley's kind of aptitude for really dark but yet hilarious subject matter. But I think the thing that really kind of sets this apart from a lot of the other movies of its ilk, you know, this movie had elements of Coen Brothers in it. This movie had elements of a lot of other directors that I really, really enjoyed. This movie kind of knows when to lean back and when to go in for the funnies. Like, it's really, really incredibly tightly paced. I very, very much enjoyed the score. The editing, I think, is absolutely impeccable. Like, this movie is so tight that by the time you're finished, at least me, I was left very, very much wanting more. I think the characters in this are kind of the perfect epitome of Long Island people, as far as kind of having somewhat of this warm facade, but at the same time kind of having something really sinister underneath, while also at the same time not exactly being the brightest beans in the bunch. It shows when kind of everyone's reaction to to when they first find out all the money that is missing is just kind of like, oh my god, whatever shall we do? And it literally ends up coming down to a fucking kid in order to like kind of set everyone straight. And that was only like the fifth best thing about this movie. I think the cinematography is absolutely incredible. Jackman once again proves that he can actually act outside of playing Wolverine. He was an absolute marvel in this movie. It really sucks that he was pretty much overlooked for the Oscar and had to settle for the Emmy, which is really disappointing because there was no way he was ever winning that over Mark Ruffalo. But this is still a really, really good movie. It's one of my favorites of the year. I enjoyed every single minute of it. And yeah, check it out if you can. Bad Education on HBO.
What is that about Long Island people, by the way?
What do you mean?
Like, not to sound like Seinfeld or anything, but like, what's the deal with Long Island people? But like,
just,
what is
I don't
that
know,
about Long
dude.
Island
And
people?
the funny
That's
thing
such
is,
an accurate portrayal.
I know, but like the funny thing is that I keep thinking that it's going to be one of those situations where, no, they can't possibly be like that. And every Long Islander that I've met, if not being exactly like that, has some element of that. Like, I've had people from Long Island who grew up like 10 minutes from there, who were like around when that scandal went down, who said, yeah, this is the perfect Long Island movie. And funnily enough, the writer-director, the director this time, Corey Finley did not write this one. It was written by Mike Mikowski. The screenwriter, Mike Mikowski, met actually the real Tassone as a child before the scandal broke, as he attended Roslyn High School in the late 2000s. So a little bit, definitely, I think, gives a lot of extra perspective on the screenplay, which again, to me, is one of the best written screenplays of the entire year.
A little close to home there.
A little bit.
That's something else. Wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah. So for me, jumping in at number 8 is a really, really weird film. I almost didn't put this film on the list because I was afraid to talk about it. It's so weird. So I'm just gonna read.
I'm thinking of. I can't wait.
I'm just gonna read the premise because it comes from IMDb, and it's not me trying to summarize how just awkward this context is. Alice, a young innocent Catholic girl, is tempted into masturbating after an AOL chat suddenly turns sexual. However, is conflicted as the act would be considered a sin. So this movie's called Yes, God,
Yes. Oh, man.
It's starring Natalia Dyer, and she is phenomenal in this movie. It's a short film. It's about an hour and 20 minutes. It just hits that feature length. But god damn it, is there something about this film that's just so charming, because it's so, you know what it is? This is a true human study. This film shows sort of, because it's set in the year 2001, so it kind of shows like that generation who's 10 years older than me, 13 years older than you. They were really the first of the internet alone after school with a computer generation. It was unregulated. You had websites where you could see all sorts of terrible and crazy things, but people were starting to communicate freely over the internet and have conversations, and you didn't have to put a face to someone to have a conversation with them. You could really get to know someone behind a keyboard. Of course, we went on to learn there was a lot of danger with that. Our generation got a lot of PSAs in school. Be careful of those chat rooms. You never know who could be there.
I remember
because
those.
Of this generation. And it was a freeing time for these people because they had the world quite literally at their fingertips. I know people have said that for years, but like, you could Google search anything and find everything. The internet was the wild, wild west back then. And she's a perfect example of old ideals meets new ideals. A young Catholic girl, good girl, never does anything wrong. And she plays the shit out of this part. Excuse my French. She is so convincing as the innocent girl who stumbles upon this by accident, but curiosity has piqued her interest. And so she goes forward and she keeps finding more and more different things, talking to different people in these chat rooms. They expose her not only to sexual stuff, to the way the world works and how it's not so black and white, how it's not so heaven and hell, good and evil. As she does this, she uncovers through the mystery that, maybe the father of her church isn't quite as holy as he thinks. And maybe it's more of a power trip for him rather than serving a god or a greater power. And so the dichotomy of every single aspect of this movie, how there's an equal and rivaling worthy contradiction to what's happening. It's so well written. It's so airtight that it's just an enjoyable, weird, quirky little ride. And check it out, man. It's a really weird coming of age story. One of the weirdest I've seen, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I just randomly, I was in the car one day and I wasn't driving. I was in a parking lot. I don't know why. I was just searching through my phone, bored. It was probably one of those just like off periods where I was just driving around. And I saw this trailer and it was really, really strange and funny. And I never got a chance to get to it, but it looked really, really interesting. So that's interesting that you say that. Again, like, I see a trailer like that, I automatically think, oh boy, crazy teen sex comedy. But
not
I don't
at
know.
all.
Would you say that this kind of takes that to like a whole different level, if anything?
It's got the maturity of a ladybird, though.
All right.
It explores things from a mature standpoint.
All right.
Because she's not like, she's mentally older than she is at her age in the movie.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
she's lived a life that makes her a little older. And
Right.
so it's more mature in its nature, which is why I consider it like an actual film. Like, you could show this in a school and kids could get value out of it for aspiring filmmakers. Like, it's that smart with how it plays with these very silly ideas. So that's why it's in here. I think it says a lot about filmmaking.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Yes, before we move on, Stranger Boys number 8, Hubie Halloween. Yes, Chris, you watched this movie. Do you have anything to say about it real quick?
If I had an honorable mention, it would be this movie. I fucking love this film, dude. I don't know why, Stranger Boy, I 120% agree. Hubie Halloween is amazing.
I'm honestly kind of shocked and a little bit sad it wasn't on your list. I was kind of hoping.
I mean, it was for a little while, but then, you see more movies and you realize dodging wrenches is only get you so far.
Yeah, I get that. All right, so number 7. So it's interesting because not exactly this number, but the number that I had in this spot last year or close to it was Parasite, and Parasite ended up going on to win Best Picture, and this is the favorite to win Best Picture right now, and so it'll probably win. Again, it just is a matter of, it's probably is the best movie of the year, if not one of the best movies of the year. It just ended up kind of being low because I liked all these other movies better. My number 7 is Nomadland. Chloe Zhao's absolutely impeccable statement on the state of America right now. And the examination of a group of people that, quite frankly, I didn't even know existed. Did you know anything about the Nomad movement going into this? Yeah.
I had no idea.
This was a really, really fascinating exploration into kind of, again, I think the thing that Jorah Mormont made so great with this one statement on Game of Thrones, which is, why is it the little people, or why is it the common folk always suffer when the High Lords play their Game of Thrones? And this, to me, is the perfect example of that. As, again, the story of a woman portrayed by Frances McDormand who loses everything, whose husband lost everything during the recession, and as a result is forced to sell their home, pack all of her belongings into a van, and ends up joining this incredible movement of nomads that live out of a combination of vans and trailers as they just travel from one American land spot to another. And the adventures that they go on, she learns a lot about herself. She learns a lot about the state of the country. She kind of learns kind of the true statement of people. There's, I think, this one incredible scene with her and her family members where her family members are, of course, trying to blame it on certain different members of the establishment. And there's just this very obvious look on her face as far as revealing, that has nothing to do with that. It's just a matter of we're the ones that got unlucky in the situation. Now they have to pay the price, but they're doing it in a really, really interesting way. They're kind of embodying the spirit of America, if you will. I know somebody kind of drops that as a sarcastic term in the movie, but it truly is what Chloe Zhao is seeking to accomplish with this. And I find it really kind of, not funny, but almost tragic in a way that her next movie after this is going to be Marvel's Eternals, which, again, just shows the trajectory of, if you want to be a successful director in America today, you need to direct an indie that gets a lot of attention, and you need to direct a Marvel movie. And it sucks that we kind of can't get that kind of same range of creativity that we can get, where we can get a filmmaker like making 10 movies and still not necessarily knowing what it is they want to make. But Zhao knocks it out of the park here, proving herself fully as the American Andrea Arnold. She even actually, to me, does a lot of things better than Andrea Arnold. Andrea Arnold can almost pull an Inarritu as far as getting a little bit too lost in nature, but Chloe Zhao knows exactly how to balance the backdrop of this in order to kind of juxtapose it perfectly with the themes of the movie. Again, there's a lot of rural areas, a lot of rocky areas, but again, just show when it comes to movies that show kind of the undying spirit of people to survive and just, continue to make it. There's one incredibly powerful performance from, again, a movie that, again, just seems to be the current trend with most Oscar bait movies, which is get a lot of non-actors and just have them play themselves. And that just seems to be the going trend for independent cinema right now, and it works pretty much every single time. The performance, I mean, I love Frances McDormand, I love David Strathairn, but to me, the best performances in this movie were from the non-actors. There's this one guy, the leader of the Nomads, that gives this incredibly powerful speech about his son at the end. There's this one woman, his name is Charlene Swanky, who I wanted to give an incredible shout-out to because she knocked my socks off with her scenes and kind of her quest and her solemnness. There's a very tragic twist that's revealed about her character. Not gonna lie, probably saw it coming, but just what her character and the decision that she kind of makes, and as far as the kind of coming to terms with what it is that she's dealing with, it's an impeccable movie. I absolutely recommend everyone to see it. It's one of the few where I'd say believe the hype, and I would not at all be disappointed if this ended up winning Best Picture. It's my number 7, Nomadland.
We'll get to Nomadland.
Yeah, punt. In order to bring the sports terms back into it, punt this for later.
Yeah, for sure. Solid movie though, nonetheless. Yes. So. My number 7 film was The Invisible Man.
Nice.
This was so good. This was such an interesting theater experience because I think it could have easily have been so cheap and so gimmicky, but they really sold it, And I remember being so fascinated by this film, and I think the film community was too, especially film Instagram. Everyone was posting up how they did this, all the behind-the-scenes footage of the movie after it come out, because how did they do that? It was amazing.
And how did they get it to cost as cheap as it did?
Yeah, for real, dude. And of course, I mean, you're better with names. What's her name? Because she was phenomenally
Elizabeth
brilliant.
Moss from Mad Men and Handmaid's
Elizabeth
Tale.
Moss, man. Exactly, the Handmaid's Tale actress. Dude, she was just knock your socks off. Incredible. She carried it. She really carried it. I mean, I couldn't blame you when you said to me, like, for months throughout the course of the year, this is my number 1 film still. Can you believe it? I was like, yeah. I can believe it, actually. You always will see more movies than me. You did this year. You always will. It's just something Dom's going to do. Movie nerd, TV nerd. But I was like, out of what I've seen, because I at least try to see as many of the big ones as I can, I don't blame you for having this, because she not only carried it, the world was so lived in. It was so real. It was just like a horror film unlike any I had seen in quite some time. I think the theater going experience really elevated that.
Certainly
we will
helped.
see what happens as time goes on. But we did still have theaters at this point in time. And even without that, I know a lot of people who have enjoyed this just on their couch under lockdown and love this movie, called me up and were like, Chris, I know you saw this. No one else has seen this yet for some weird reason. And now everyone's seen this now. But there was a point in time where what did you think about this? And I was like, so glad you saw this. I had so many conversations about this film. And it was still fun to talk about it. It wasn't like, oh, great, I have to keep in touch with this friend now. We got to talk about this movie. They didn't see anything else. No, I always welcomed it because I could watch this movie. This is probably going to become a staple of Halloween for me. So, yeah.
No, it's definitely a movie I'm looking forward to rewatching. Again, Lee Winnell just knocked it out of the park. Just his transition to kind of what his career used to be, for just writing Saw sequel after Saw sequel, and then finally just with how he's able to turn his career around, first with Upgrade and now with this movie. Again, dude, that scene of the restaurant, that I will probably we're both gonna remember that scene for a very, very long time to come. I still remember vividly our reaction of seeing the knife hovering in midair and not knowing what was gonna happen, and then a split second later we were both like, whoa, and we were just if we weren't locked in by that point, we were locked in from that moment through to the rest of the movie.
My chest felt heavy. I almost broke a sweat. That's what you want a movie to make you feel and do. So number 7, Invisible Man.
Absolutely. Great pick. And of course, continuing with Stranger Boy's choices. Thank you once again, Stranger Boy, for keeping up with us. Number 7, the Disney Plus original, the one and only Ivan, which stars Sam Rockwell as a talking gorilla. And a bunch of other big name actors as a bunch of other CG animals. Disney, it's good to know you can still do talking animals correctly.
Hey,
I don't know if that's
show.
correctly. Yeah, for real.
Can't wait.
Yep. All right. So my number 6 is The Five Bloods, which is a movie that I saw the same weekend that I saw The King of Staten Island, but I saw this one first, and I needed to just let it sit. I'm sad. And looking back in hindsight, again, I try not to have any regrets, but if I did have one regret, it was the fact that we didn't get to cover this movie on the podcast, because this was just a powerful movie. Spike Lee officially made his comeback 2 years ago with BlacKkKlansman, and then when I heard that he was going to do a war movie next, I'm like, sweet, let's go. And it was going right to Netflix. It was slated to come out later on in the fall, and then obviously once the lockdown happened, it got pushed back to the summer, and it ended up kind of being, in a weird way, the summer blockbuster that Tenet wasn't. And it's just an incredibly powerful story. Once again, Spike covering, again, the plights of African Americans in this country. This time covering it from the war perspective, which is something that he really hasn't covered since one of his lesser known and watched movies, that being Miracle at St. Anna, and released in 2008. But this one sees 4 black Vietnam veterans returning to the site that was the site of one of their bloodiest battles in order to recover both several bars of gold that they buried there, as well as the remains of their fallen squad leader, portrayed in, again, at the time, unknown to us, one of his last performances, and knocks it out of the park as far as acting goes, that being the late, great Chadwick Boseman. Rest in peace to that guy. Gave us so many incredible, iconic performances within just a short amount of time, and for being in 4 of the 4, I would say, biggest Marvel movies, all while fighting cancer at the same time. It's just a feat in and of itself. But again, Chadwick's not the only member of this movie. Clark Peters and Isaiah Whitlock Jr., both Wire alumni, are incredible in this. Spike himself, to me, is the star, even though he does not appear himself in this movie. Just, again, the amazing color palette, the incredible cinematography that we have here. It's the only reason why I had this movie a little bit lower at first, before I kind of started really rethinking it, was because I thought it was a little bit too derivative of previous movies that I know for a fact that Spike Lee loved. Like, the influences are all over this movie, as far as this being Apocalypse Now meets Treasure of the Sierra Madre, literally to the point where I thought there were scenes that were replicated right from Apocalypse Now. But it's still an absolutely incredible movie. Again, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Delroy Lindo, who of course gives an absolutely impeccable performance, probably the best he's ever given, and will most likely, if not win, be nominated. Yeah, it's an absolutely incredible movie. I think that the second half, I think, is significantly more problematic than the first half, but it continues everything that it is that Spike does great. Just kind of his examination of a different sect of of Vietnam War PTSD and affliction, kind of the trauma that a lot of people carried from that. Again, in a war that a lot of people in hindsight consider to be unnecessary. Sorry. And the film did a really, really interesting thing as far as that went. You know, I think that certain of the resolutions might have felt a little bit haphazard. There's one scene in particular that I didn't necessarily like. I thought it was a little bit too drawn out, despite kind of a lot of people regarding it as tension-filled. But again, if you like Spike Lee, then absolutely I recommend this. This is an essential, and again, just as far as being essential viewing for 2020, Defy Bloods.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say to that is rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman, man.
Yes.
You were a true superhero. So
For real.
With that being said, jumping into my number 6 film, this movie is awesome, and I'm not going to apologize for it. It's The Babysitter, Killer Queen. Yes. Never does a movie.
Oh my God, you have no idea how happy this makes me.
I mean,
you have no idea how happy this makes me. I mean, look, I couldn't put it in my worst of the year. I'm not gonna be that guy because this movie is so much freaking fun. But oh man, even you have to admit that this was a stupid movie, but it's awesome.
Yeah, but it's okay. So the story behind me getting into the Babysitter films comes from me hitting up Dom and being like, "Hey, like, I want to stay in the Halloween spirit, but I don't want the shit to be scared out of me right now. Recommend me something." He's like, "Well, I mean, if you watch the first one, the second one just came out this year, and you can cross that off your list." And I was like, "Perfect. Say no more. I'm going to check this one out." And I was in love with this from the start, man. I mean, the first one's phenomenal, but we're not here to talk about the first one.
That was 3
we're here
years
to talk
ago.
we're here to talk about the second one, dude. And Killer Queen is absolutely incredible, man. I mean, this movie, as silly as it is, as schlocky as it is, it's so well executed. It's so well written. The performances are so perfect for what they need to be. You can't deny that it's a good film. You cannot deny there's good filmmaking here. You might not like the taste. It might not be your specific cup of tea. You might look down upon these kinds of films. But I think there's a reason that this film kind of stands above some of its peers. And it's because even though it is a little bit of what some would say a lesser quality, lesser taste, they know what they're doing.
Show me those people. I want to meet some of those people and explain to them what an entertaining movie is.
They trust me. They exist, okay? And that they do exist, and it's very unfortunate. But if you watch this film, you understand that you don't even need Samara Weaving as much on screen as she was in the first one.
Nope.
And she was incredible in that first one, because this film actually digs its heels on fundamentals, writing, execution, knowing what it's going for and achieving it which is weird to say about this movie. It's weird to say about any of these kinds of movies, and most of them you can't say that about. But the fact that this one is actually rooted from good filmmaking makes it worth putting in a top 10, because I already like these kind of movies, but none of them stand on their own ground. This one actually does. So if you like film and if you appreciate film, you're at least going to see fundamentals at work. And if you're like someone like me who can just go for a zany, wacky time, and you also want there to be, sound, logic, reasoning, and execution, you want to enjoy it. You don't just want to make fun of it while you're watching it. You want to enjoy the zany and crazy nature of it. This is that film. It is the quintessential action horror comedy of Halloween for me going forward. I hope they make more, and they got me. I'm hooked. I'm a fan. I'm into this babysitter universe, which is such a weird sentence.
I love the first one. I absolutely love this one. I still can't figure out which one I enjoyed more because, again, I don't know if anything is ever going to quite top the surprise factor of the first movie. That was the perfect movie. That first movie was the perfect movie to watch. My third or fourth week up at school, and I just turned it on a random Saturday morning. I saw it was up. I put it on, and I couldn't stop until it was over. I'm like, this is incredible. And then the second one comes out, and I'm rolling my eyes because I know what the jokes are going to be. But this movie just has such a great sense of self-awareness.
Right.
Oh my God.
Exactly.
It knows exactly what it's doing. And I don't think I had as much fun with any other movie this year the way that I did with this movie, just in this particular sense. And honestly, if this movie ends up making our combined list at the end of this video, I will not be angry at all. So
I won't be. So yeah. With that being said,
yes, real quick, Stranger Boys number 6, Feliz Navidad, which I just did a look on. I believe it's a Hallmark movie directed by Melissa Joan Hart, starring Mario Lopez. That's about all that I know about that. But again, props to having been able to just watch anything in 2020. Wow, I almost said that 3 times. Yeah, I'm totally here right now. Yeah, so now we're in the top 5. So again, I feel like we're really, like you said, Chris, we're getting into the nitty-gritty, and I can definitely say without a doubt that these 5 movies are, even more so than my combined top 10 list, the movies that definitely, they may not have gotten me to think the hardest, but they definitely just created for some absolutely special moments for me throughout this very, very dark, very miserable year. And this next movie, The Five Bloods, was kind of the Vietnam movie that none of us were expecting to get. But this movie, weirdly enough, despite this being about an incredibly famous court case from the late 60s, ended up being probably the most emblematic year, kind of movie of 2020, especially given everything that has happened recently, just in the political sphere, without needing to go into specifics. My number 5 is The Trial of the Chicago 7. Aaron Sorkin's follow-up to Molly's Game a couple years ago, his next directorial effort. This was a movie that was famously in development hell for a lot of years. Aaron Sorkin wanted Spielberg to direct this for a while and ended up getting shelved. Sorkin ended up choosing to direct it. This movie went through a lot of casting shifts, but easily, this is, without a doubt, one of the most entertaining, engaging, relevant movies of the year. The ensemble cast that it puts together is absolutely impeccable. Once again, Sorkin knows how to balance multiple people. He, once again, knows how to write incredible dialogue, and he knows how to make these people just flow and mesh, because never once was I kind of unaware or felt like any one character was not getting their due. I enjoyed for the most part, every single performance in this movie. Particular shout-outs to the ones who are going to get the Oscar buzz, that being Sacha Baron Cohen, Mark Rylance, and Yahya Abdul-Mateen II as Abby Hoffman. As Abby Hoffman, Bobby Seale, and Bill Kunstler. Oh my God, again, still having troubles being able to say that last name with a straight face. But I also want to give a shout out to my guy, Eddie Redmayne, who is a guy that I've kind of been silently rooting for, because I feel like people have just, kind of rooted themselves against him because of his just demeanor when it comes to acting. But he really, 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 really proved himself in this movie. Again, just an absolutely incredible movie. It's a courtroom drama, which is something that we haven't had in a while, but it covers an area of history that, quite frankly, I was aware of in bits and pieces, but I wasn't entirely aware of until kind of this year. And after seeing it, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is definitely, to me, the movie that we need right now, just overall. Yeah, and Sorkin is still the man. He's one of my absolute favorite creators, still working in Hollywood. The only thing that I'll say is that this movie, I feel like much more so than Molly's Game, shows him when he's fully untethered. But at the same time, he still writes incredible dialogue. He writes incredible scenes. His scenes flow and move. This was probably the movie that I came back to and rewatched the most this year. Again, it also helps that it's on Netflix, so it became incredibly available. And yeah. It's certainly enjoyable, and I never thought I would say that about a courtroom drama, but it's Aaron Sorkin, and every time he makes a movie, it will probably end up making a top 10 list of mine. So again, it's right on Netflix. My number 5, Trial of the Chicago 7.
Very cool. My number 5 is a little film called The Vast of Night. This film is directed by an Andrew Patterson, Andrew Patterson. You might not know him, and that's fine, because I didn't know him until I heard of this film. In fact, I hadn't found this film until I heard someone doing a roundup video of their top 10 favorite science fiction films of 2020. And I said, okay, this looks really well made. And they really hearkened on their review about the budget being so small. And that's apparent. It really is apparent. But the clever filmmaking of this movie. Did you watch this one?
I did not get a chance to watch it. No,
Okay.
I was actually going to ask you to fill me in on it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I definitely want to get your take on it at some point. You see, what they do in this film is they use 1950s Russia as sort of like the enemy of the day because they're in the Cold War, as we all know. And so this UFO appears over their small town out in the Midwest, and they don't really know if it's Russia, if it's spies, but they never show what's happening. And they do sort of the classic 1950s horror limitations, sci-fi limitations are in play here by their budget in 2020, where I just recently watched a movie that I actually really love, the original Invaders of the Body Snatchers. And that movie is phenomenal because it knows what it can and can't do. And what I mean by that is they know they don't have the technology to show the aliens the way they probably want to at that time. So they really rely on the dialogue. They rely on the storytelling, the actions the characters take to build suspense to what you never see, which are the actual aliens. Sure, you see the little pods that they come out of, but you never really see the full transmutation. You never see any of that because they simply couldn't do it at the time. And this film had similar restrictions. That's why I think it's pretty ironic that it's set in 1950s, where they had to rely on the merits of 1950s sci-fi and horror storytelling to achieve the suspense that they do by just, again, digging in, really focusing on the writing, the narrative, the characters, making sure that each of their journeys is meaningful and gets you to that point at the end of the film where inevitably you do kind of figure out what's going on. And like any good sci-fi film, they leave it open-ended. This is kind of like a master class in do not let someone tell you cannot make a movie. Because this guy had everything against him, couldn't get funding for this thing to save his life. I did a little research on it. It was tough. And a lot of this came out of small donations here, small donations there. They made a really phenomenal movie, and they just really do the time period so well, you know? They show a lot of the old radios. They show a high school dance. They show someone actually in the phone, in the switchers, operating girls, it's like switching. Okay, sorry, Miss Clark, I'm going to send you over to Amory now. We just had another phone call coming in. Like they actually patched you in, and it's hilarious, man. And it kind of shows how affected people were by the Cold War as well, and how that kind of messed with their heads, and no one really knew what to think, which was really interesting. And it is an important science fiction film because I think a lot of people these days have lost sight of a different side of science fiction, the storytelling side. We all go to see these spectacle movies now, you know, and we're getting back to some more of the storytelling sides with films like High Life, Ad Astra, to name a few, which I think really dig their heels into the narrative first. And I'm really glad that we have movies like that. But even on a smaller, more indie scale, I think this is an important movie because of what it does for, I think, filmmakers who might see this and get inspired, people who can actually make that movie they want to make, even if you have limitations. I mean, there quite literally is a tracking shot where they couldn't afford a dolly, so they had someone be very still on a skateboard and a gimbal going through a whole town to get the shot, and it looks amazing, and it looks 110% like any other professional 3-minute tracking shot you've ever seen. It's an important film. Go and watch it. It's a really cool sci-fi film. It's actually really scary, too. It has a little bit of horror twinge, and I loved it. These are my kind of movies. It's certainly a Chris pick. So if you've kind of learned my taste watching our show over the past year and a half or so, might not be for you if you normally don't like the Silver Lakes of the world, or the Ladybirds of the world, the very specifically manufactured taste movies. Might not be for you, but at least
Specifically
you
for
need to
your
see it.
tastes.
Or
Specifically
people
for your
like me.
tastes.
Yeah, people like me in that vein. But that's why it's on here for me, because I think outside of it being for me, it's a very important film. They did a goddamn good job, and I think more people need to hear about The Vast of Night. So, yeah,
Sounds like some good old-fashioned guerrilla filmmaking, harkening back to our Duchess days, which again is something
it
that
is.
I hope you'll cover on a later entry in your list. But real quick, once again, shout out to Stranger Boy, the loyal and devoted Stranger Boy, with his number 5, Bill and Ted Face the Music. Great choice. Honestly, I wish that I could have put it higher. I enjoyed all of the Bill and Ted movies, but they kind of it's one of those franchises where it's like, yeah, every one of these is kind of the same. But those movies undeniably have their charm, and I'm glad that Alex and Keanu were able to get back together in order to make it kind of a weird Cobra Kai of their own, if you will. So, moving on to my number 4, which is a movie that we did not watch together, but we were able to cover on the podcast. And I will say towards this that Judd Apatow made the incredibly smart decision of not trying to rush this through the pandemic, not having this delayed, and just decided to make the incredibly smart choice of releasing this direct to VOD. And I'm really glad that he did, because even though I would say the comedy is something that has largely been driven out of the theaters, which is really disappointing, because some of my absolute favorite experiences with movies in theaters have been comedies, being able to laugh at some really funny jokes. Judd was able to take his latest movie, which is another semi-autographical take on an up-and-coming comedic actor, and turn it into one of the most earnest and heartfelt movies of the year, and that is The King of Staten Island. Which, again, Pete Davidson, I believe I said this before, so at the risk of sounding kind of too repetitive, I will say that Pete Davidson is not somebody who I particularly was paying attention to throughout the last couple of years. Everything that I saw from him kind of just, I'm like, okay, what is this weird-looking dude doing, and why do people find him funny? He just clearly does a lot of drugs. And then I saw Big Time Adolescence, and that was kind of the precursor to this, as far as showing, oh no, this guy's got a lot more layers to him. And then with this latest movie, again, it's Judd Apatow. It's the guy who basically defined comedy for the last 20 years, and he just takes everything that it is that he's good at and does it even better here. It helps that obviously this is a semi-autobiographical take on Davidson's life, obviously, and that plays heavily into this. It kind of elevates this to above that typical comedy level, even though it's playing around with a lot of themes that we've seen in Judd's comedies and just other comedies that we've seen and enjoyed before. It still manages to bring those back around into a refreshing new light. Obviously, Davidson Scott character in this movie still has a lot of growing up to do, obviously, but he shows that he's not kind of your average run-of-the-mill character. He's got layers. He's got, problems that he may not be able to solve overnight, but he, with all the people that he meets throughout the movie and all the different interactions and all the, again, crazy celebrity cameos that Judd, of course, as always, gets. The cinematography in this movie is off the chain. It's probably one of the best shot comedies that I've seen. Just forget, all year. I think this might be the only comedy that I've seen all year, the only good one at least. But it's again, this is shot like a pro, and it makes sense because it's shot by Robert Elswit, Academy Award winning Robert Elswit, who famously shot There Will Be Blood. I think that people who kind of overlook this, me personally, I just don't think have souls. Of course, the Academy was never going to look at something like this because they just, they're all uppity and completely shun any genre other than boring white people dramas. But no, this is a great movie. And it's just a great kind of chill enjoyment movie, and it's a great kind of escapism that we needed, quite frankly, during this year. So, yeah, The King of Staten Island, my number 4.
Yeah, well said, my friend. Well said. For me, number 4 was a movie we did watch together.
Yes.
And we did cover on the podcast.
Yes, we did.
Mank.
I
really enjoyed my time with this one, man. Yeah. Every year there comes along a movie where on paper it's not for me, but when I watch it, it ends up being really for me. Like, I really enjoy the history, the way that they were really able to pay such attention and in return respect to the time it was set in, the way that they were able to write this story without leaning on the coattails of big names like Orson Welles, really able to make it about the character of Mankiewicz, who his history for the most part has kind of forgotten about, and who history for the most part doesn't quite really know what happened with and where he stands. And so I think they also do a good job of kind of bringing that ambiguity into the story as you get to know him, as you get to watch him go through life, sort of stumbling through most parts. And it's a really cool, not meant to be a character study, but to me, it kind of is a character study of the forgotten writer, the forgotten, impactful mind of a generation. Maybe credit gets distributed in the wrong way. He, wrote Citizen Kane, but did history remember him as the writer of Citizen Kane? I didn't learn that in film school. I've been to 2 different film schools, and I never heard his name until this movie. So you answer that question. Some people might say yes, some people might say no, but it's not as clear and definitive as it is Orson Welles. So the movie, while being about such a messy subject matter, is so well polished and so well done. I can't say it's David Fincher at his best. I haven't seen enough David Fincher movies to say that. But what I can say is it's one of the best types of these films that I've seen. It really resonated with me, especially because a lot of it's alienating, being so far out of the culture that I grew up to know and live in and experience. So the fact that they were able to pull me in and get me assimilated with the time that, to be honest, isn't a time I go to for entertainment too often. It's a long time ago, and sometimes it's slower, and that's fine. Everyone's of their generation to a certain extent, but it pulled me in. So yeah, Mank, for many reasons more in our hour-long podcast we did about it. Right now, though, those are the real, I think, we're covering it a few months later. That's really what comes to mind, is just the attention to detail and the way they're able to suck you into this guy's messy life. It's really well done.
Yeah, so punt, obviously, for an entry that is soon to come. But again, once again, Stranger Boy, his number 4. We Bare Bears, the movie. Lot of animated choices I'm seeing on here. Again, kind of goes to show, obviously, where priorities are here go. But again, not too much of a change as far as my next entry, because my number 3 is Mank. It was really interesting to me seeing this as David Fincher's next movie, because David Fincher does not seem like an establishment type of a guy. In fact, he's kind of made his career based on the fact that he is so anti-establishment. And the fact that I'm like, oh no, he's playing into the Oscar trope. He's doing a black and white period piece movie shot in the vein of an old Hollywood movie about a figure from old Hollywood. It was like checking off all the boxes as far as a movie that is like made to win Oscars. But I'm like, look, Fincher has never proven me wrong. His last movie, again, he did was Gone Girl, and then he basically revolutionized TV with House of Cards and basically invented the Netflix model. So it was kind of like perfect synergy, him coming back to do this movie for Netflix, obviously based on the script that his late father wrote. And it's very funny because, again, Chris, the first time that we watched this, again, I'm not going to lie, I fell asleep during a little bit of it. I didn't quite get the full message or picture of this movie, but I went back. I watched this movie again, and I'm like, yeah, this movie is absolutely impactful. Again, without kind of trying to repeat a lot of the points that you were bringing up, the idea of kind of ownership in Hollywood and what that really means. And again, just kind of, it's so funny because this is the examination of the Hollywood system and probably its harshest critique, which again is something that could only be done by somebody like Fincher, because that is a guy who, again, is just so wickedly talented and is just so precise about everything that he wants. Like, that nothing ever happens in one of his movies without him specifically saying, and this was no exception. It was also nice to see Gary Oldman prove that he can actually act without the use of a fat suit or prosthetics again, because he was great in this movie. He was really, really charming. He was doing a little bit of again, like a 1940s, like, kind of very expressive performance, but again, that's the time period, so that's what every actor is really doing. Also, shout outs to the supporting cast: Amanda Seyfried, Arliss Howard, Charles Dance, Tuppence Middleton, a lot of other incredible actors. Tom Burke with his portrayal of Orson Welles. Again, for a movie that is pitched as a movie that is pitched as the making of Citizen Kane, there's very actual little of that in this movie. In fact, half of this movie is just Mank, recovering from alcohol poisoning in a bed while writing the script. And in a weird way, again, kind of to bounce off your point, this is a movie that shows the evolution of the screenwriting process and kind of how that is kind of eaten away by the powers that be in Hollywood, but also how that can still lead to some incredibly interesting creative. It's so fascinating because this is a movie to me that, with its antithesis towards kind of how creation happens in Hollywood, ends up still being inspiring as far as showing, yeah, you can still, create this kind of stuff. And for the vein, again, the technicals, I never need to talk about the technicals in a Fincher movie because they're always going to be spot on perfect. I loved how the fact that you brought up the fact to me with the shooting of this movie, how they shot this in, 16K or something, and made it look like original, like black and white grainy footage. Like, that's really impressive to me overall. This is a great movie. This is a great experience. Of course, didn't last too long on Netflix because people just don't like watching black and white movies, and they're like old-timey movies, when there's no explosions or like quippy dialogue or like Marvel
It's
stuff.
telling of where we're at.
Definitely. Which is funny considering the fact that this is one of the sharpest written movies I've seen over the year. Like, the one-liners in this movie to me are as good as any Marvel one-liner, probably even better, actually, just as far from a writing standpoint. And yeah, that's my number 3, Mank.
Yeah, I would say they're better.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so jumping into Stranger Boys number 3.
Stranger Boys number 3. Scoob! Uh,
Nice, dude.
I didn't watch this movie. I heard it was good. It seemed really enjoyable. It seemed like kind of It seemed like, again, Warner Brothers and Hanna-Barbera basically doing their version of what the Lego movies are doing, but with that type of animation. And I know the people who watched it enjoyed it. So
Yeah, I just couldn't justify paying that amount of money for it.
yeah, I'm like, yeah,
So,
I'm not paying money for that. That's the only
yeah.
thing.
Well,
State of movies in 2020, people.
yeah, state of movies in 2020. So for me, we're jumping into the top 3. We're here.
Yep.
Very cool, man. We're doing it. I'm assuming honorable mentions right before number 1, yeah?
Honorable mentions right before number 1.
Perfect. So with that being said, let's get to that number 1 spot. But before we get to that number 1 spot, I have to tell you about my number 3 movie of the year,
Yes.
Nomadland.
Hell yeah. So you watched this movie very recently. So yes, and you've been keeping very tight-lipped about it, rightfully so. So let me know, what were your thoughts on this movie?
This movie ruined my whole week in the best way possible. It is honestly probably one of the realest movies I've seen in a long time. I was gonna watch it with my mom. I was saying, hey, this seems like it seems like a human story. And the synopsis I read, I'm really glad I didn't, because it is depressingly beautiful, is how I would describe it. Because, and I guess it takes maybe a certain age to really appreciate this. I'm at the age where I'm interested in more than just film and sports. I am politically minded. You guys will never know what I think, but I do feel for people in the world. And you're right. This film covered a certain sect of people that I never knew existed. But not only did it do that, it just shows how much work we have to do in the world, in our country. And goddamn, I felt so bad for them. They're all just trying to put on this warrior face the whole movie. And they have such a tough life, and they do such a good job of that. And the little things really, really are important to them. But you feel sad when they're happy watching this film, because you look at what you have and the life that you live, and you're just like, it's not fair. And very rarely do movies have implications of this level. And it's hard to get through. You're sitting there and you're just like feeling guilt, which is an emotion I rarely feel while watching a movie. Just because it's like you want to help, but what can you do? You need to get your life going first before you can help others, because the best way you can help others is when you get situated. You think that's going to be a long time from now, and really this movie makes you think about all that type of stuff. And that's really why it's in the top 3. I hated it, to be honest with you. I hated watching it, but I needed to see this movie. And that's what, does this make sense? Because it's so well done,
It does.
but I hate it because it's so well done, because I hate having to think that there are people out there legitimately suffering like this.
Made you aware of something, of some of the harsh realities of life, kind of doing that thing that movies are supposed to do.
Exactly. And it's not my number 1 because I think that it isn't a perfect movie. And also maybe because it's a really hard film to talk about. So to put it number 1, I don't want there to be a bittersweet feeling at number 1, but this is like not just a good movie of 2020. This is like a very important movie of all time to me personally. Out of what I've seen, the level that this film resonates at is surreal. So Nomadland, number 3. Watch it and then think about, at least what I did was think about what I'm going to do in the future to like help people. Because that's literally the conversations I have with myself after watching this freaking movie, man.
Without any knowledge of the Academy Award race, obviously, this year, because that just already is just a beast in and of itself. Like, are you pegging this for winning Best Picture?
I mean, I'm not. Yes, again, my knowledge isn't very strong there, and I often disagree with their front-runner choice because I think it's a little pandery, and it's very telling of who the Academy is. We can have that. We've already had that conversation. For once, I think if this wins, it might deserve it. Same as I felt with Parasite last year. Yeah. Although that was the underdog surprise hit.
Yeah, that was the underdog surprise. This is the front runner this year, and one of the few front runners that like actually deserves it. Which, again,
it would give me hope for the Academy, honestly.
Yeah, definitely.
If they chose it.
Well, the other thing, it just shows like the change up of variety. If going forward, these types of movies are going to be the only movies that are available. Like, good. It shows that we finally have seen a change in the industry that we've been wanting for so long. So let's hope that we keep getting movies like this, because again, the best movies are the ones that make us think and show us areas that we weren't aware of previously. And this checked all those boxes. Now, my top 2 choices. This was really difficult because as far as I'm concerned, and I usually don't run into this problem too often, like usually when something reaches a spot, it's in that spot and I don't change it around. But honestly, these next 2 movies were completely interchangeable. I went back and forth a lot just in the last like day today leading up to this list. I'm like, oh man, which is going to be number 2? Which is going to be number 1? And I settled on my original decision. And the reason why for that is because my number 2, at the end of the day, as incredible as this movie was, it still gave me a little bit of something that I've seen before. Now, that's no fault of the movie itself. It mostly has to do with the studio that made it, and specifically the creators that made it, and just for sheer fact of the subject matter involved, kind of the setting of it. It definitely reminded me of certain things that I've seen from the studio, and my number 2 is Soul, which was, I thought, going to be kind of the end-all, be-all movie of the year. I watched it on Christmas Day, shortly after Wonder Woman 84. I needed something to get that awful, awful taste of that movie, which is famously sitting at number 10 in my worst movies of the year list. Definitely be sure to check out that video if you guys haven't checked it out yet. And this movie came in, and immediately that whatever movie was immediately forgotten. Because from the opening, forget before even the first image that you see, the music that you hear underlying the Pixar logo immediately threw me back and made me realize, okay, finally, Pixar has come home. They are finally back to the storytelling that made them the powerhouse to begin with. And this movie takes everything that I feel like Pete Docter did so well with his previous movies that he directed for Pixar, of course, that being Monsters, Inc., Up, and specifically Inside Out, and just took that to a whole new level with his examination of jazz and how that intersects with passion in life and kind of the greater existentialism of what our role is as human beings. It was the most unexpected 2020 movie, but at the same time, it was probably the most 2020 movie as far as being the movie that really pulls the curtain back and shows, again, just like kind of what are we? What is our purpose in this universe? And for that to come from an animated movie, again, it's the shit that I've been wanting from Pixar for years, and they just have not been delivering on it, unfortunately. But this movie, they finally got back to their roots. The animation is, of course, gorgeous. The voiceover talent is incredible from everyone. Some really unexpectedly great performances, of course, anchored by Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey, who voice 2 of the most endearing, heartwarming characters of the year overall. Some of the funniest jokes, obviously, again, just for this movie to, again, have Knicks jokes and Wall Street jokes and just like all these different things of where you wouldn't expect, but the movie, of course, makes it work. Just, oh man, like this movie, obviously, I wanted to cry at certain points, but I couldn't because I was just so moved by it. The Reznor and Ross score, complemented by the Jean-Baptiste jazz intersections, is on another level. Like, it's great. Literally a month after I saw Reznor and Ross, they did like their best version of like a Bernard Herrmann score from the 40s for Mank, and then they do this, and it's everything that we know them for, but the music still complements kind of the great beyond, and kind of, again, like their music feels like existentialism. Like, it's ridiculous how deep this movie goes. It has one of the best endings of the year, easily, and really, again, if not for my number 1 choice, this was one of 2 5-star movies that I gave out, and I don't regret that choice one bit. Everyone's seen this movie because it's on Disney Plus and it's Pixar, but it was really the smartest decision that Disney made all year, and I'm really glad for it that Pixar was able to come home to me personally, and yeah, it's my number 2, Soul.
Yeah, man. A great movie. And what a year for Reznor and Ross.
Yeah.
Huh?
Seriously.
With that being said, my number 2 film is Judd Apatow's King of Staten Island, or should I say Pete Davidson's? It's always a tough one to go through there and decide what to say. But you know what I like about this film, man? I honestly, for the longest time, have not been a Pete Davidson fan. I think his specials are kind of weak. I do appreciate his honesty in his comedy. It's just not for me. He is kind of the type of humor that rubs me the wrong way for the most part. And so I was certainly hesitant going into this one, sort of timid, if you will, even because, well, it's Judd Apatow, and usually his works also go one of 2 ways. They're either really good or they're really bad. And so them teaming up with Bill Burr, someone else who I've always been a little iffy on, was a really scary pairing right there, a really scary grouping of people, if you will. And I love this movie, man. I really thought this was like such an honest and true human story. Watching interviews with Pete Davidson, hearing about his upbringing, of course, the tragic loss of his father to 9/11, his use of drugs, and his sort of reckless lifestyle, wondering if he'd die first or make it in the entertainment industry, quite literally. This is an amazing way to put yourself out there, show your vulnerability, but knock it out of the park in such a way where, yeah, sure, everyone makes bad choices, but you got to be able to forgive people, and You have to be able to understand that this is all about growth, this crazy experience that we're on. And so like I think a lot of people who actually are in their own, so because this is semi biographical, so it's like weird, because there's a lot of who he is in this, but there's not entirely. And maybe that's slight shielding there, but let's be honest, this is the Pete Davidson story, this movie, for the most part. I mean, it's not, but it is. And so for him to just accept the harshness of his life and take the good with the bad quite literally in stride during the performance and be so open, I never thought he was capable of a performance this deep. And that's really who wins me over in this film. But on top of it, every other decision made was really well done. I mean, you talked about the cinematography, the supporting cast was amazing. Apatow showed a maturity that I honestly never knew he had. And these guys really put themselves in a weird spot, a vulnerable spot for this movie, and it could have failed. It could have been contrived. It could have been perceived as contrived. It could have been perceived as reaching, as trying to sell you something, a feeling, a version of Pete Davidson that wasn't real. But that wasn't the case. And I really respect him for going to that place and just like owning it, man. Like I really respect him so much for this movie. Maybe he's still not for me, but I'm going to think twice before I, quickly glance over a Pete Davidson movie skit anytime I'm scrolling through a streaming service, YouTube, or flipping through the channels, because he's got me now as someone who has my attention from this movie. Yeah, and that's the way I felt about him. That's hard to do.
Yeah, right. The one thing I will say is this definitely made me go back and watch some of his bits from the celebrity roasts, which, oh man, those, I'm like, okay, I'm glad I waited until now because those show just how funny he can be. Like some of the funniest jokes I think I've ever heard came from specifically the roast of Justin Bieber, but he also got some good licks in for the Rob Lowe. Yeah, it's the Rob Lowe roast.
Gotcha.
Yeah, some really good stuff. Of course, before we move on to our honorable mentions and our number one, of course, Stranger Boys number 2. I love how he's kind of become like the de facto kind of third host in place of Pat from last year, so I'm glad we were able to do that. In fact, number 2, The Babysitter, Killer Queen. Fuck.
This man's got good taste.
Hell yeah. Definitely.
This man's got good taste.
Happy. So, before we move on, Chris, do you have any honorable mentions?
Yeah, I got like 3 or 4. First honorable mention I do want to say is Hubie Halloween. That's just a fun movie. It's not to be taken seriously, and it would, to put it in my top 10 is first off something I would never think about, but second off it would really dilute what I'm trying to get across as to why these films are in my top 10. But it's fun, man. Just have a good time with it. It brings you back to simpler times when the world was just a nicer place. Maybe it was my naivete, or maybe it was just the world was a simpler place. But Adam Sandler brings me back to a simpler time quite literally with this movie, and I thank him for that. Midnight Sky, George Clooney's directorial debut.
Not
really
his directorial
good
debut. Not at all.
Oh, it's not.
It's his 6th movie that he's directed.
Oh, okay. Well, see,
Yep.
TV nerd there. But I mean, it's my directorial debut with George Clooney. Let's put it that way.
I see. Okay.
And
That's safe.
I enjoyed
That's
it.
safe.
It's not a perfect film, but it's that space film of the year, that science fiction, deep sci-fi, sort of existential human crisis film of the year, and I thought it was well done. Well done enough to get the mention. And then last, I'll toss in 2 more films. The Rental, really fun movie, very well done. Again, to put it in my top 10 would sort of dilute what I'm going for, but I got to give it a nod because I enjoyed my time with it. And just outside of the top 10, Black Bear, starring
Black
Aubrey
Bear.
Plaza.
Yes.
What a
Christopher
film.
Abbott.
What a weird art film, but in the best way possible.
Yes.
That is a filmmaker's film. Go check it out, guys.
Absolutely.
What about you, Dom?
Yeah, so my honorable mention. So I always do this weird thing every year with honorable mentions where I try to do like the 10 movies that like could almost function as a secondary top 10 outside of my initial top 10. I sort of did that last year with my top 20 movies overall because I just saw so many good movies and there was enough there that it could be 10. So I wanted to give some that kind of fell outside the secondary 10 real quick. Midnight Sky, again, existential, but really enjoyed it. Bill and Ted Face the Music, Bad Boys for Life, Color Out of Space, Borat subsequent movie film, which is, again, a movie that did not make either of our top 10 lists for, I feel like, different reasons. But, again, I was kind of new to the whole Borat craze. Birds of Prey, the only good superhero movie that I saw in theaters this year, which, again, is not saying much, shows you the state of superhero cinema in 2020. And then probably the biggest and best entertainment that I got from this year, that being Jason Lee Houden's Guns Akimbo, which was just a ridiculous movie, just so harkening back to some incredible kind of offbeat comic book movies that we got, like embodying the best of Scott Pilgrim and Kick-Ass from 10 years ago. Daniel Radcliffe shows that he is ever evolving from the Harry Potter phase, and he was just absolutely awesome to witness in this movie. Now, the 10 movies that I wanted to give a quick shout out to as I just run them down real quick. I'm not going to discuss these too much overall, but the 10 movies that fell just outside of the top 10: Sound of Metal, starring Riz Ahmed; The Lodge with Riley Keough; The Gentleman, again, one of your first movie that you saw in theaters this year. Really, really fun time with that. Really good cast. Guy Ritchie getting back to the substance of what made him great to begin with. Minari, again, really, I tried my hardest to get you a screener for it. I really did, but they were determined to make this movie impossible to see until February. On the Rocks, really enjoyed my time with that. Black Bear, again, we watched that together. That was a movie that we both kind of didn't really know what to expect once we came out of it, but we were like, you know what? This is the filmmaker's meeting.
Your mom was in the other room, and she's like, what the hell are you guys watching? That was like,
oh, that was
so
great.
Hilarious. Yeah,
that was great.
Perfect.
Oh, that was funny. Yeah, Big Time Adolescence. Obviously, the first big Pete Davidson thing. Shout out to American High, obviously, up in Syracuse. You will always be my MVP. The Devil All the Time. Antonio Campos' movie following up Rebecca, which is a movie that I feel like kind of came and went, but was a really interesting and fascinating movie. Palm Springs. Arguably, I would say kind of the guilty pleasure movie of the year, but not, because it was just showed that, hey, rom-coms can still be good, and we can still do the Groundhog's Day plot in new, different, and interesting and creative ways. And Andy Samberg and Kristen Melody were absolutely delightful to watch together. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't stand up for my boy. As much as this movie was, at times, I'm not going to lie, Chris, I'll be that guy to say, this movie hurt my brain at points to watch, but it was still one of the most entertaining and certainly experiences of the year, and that was, of course, Christopher Nolan's Tenet. I can't wait until we watch this movie together next week. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to leave it at that, because just, I feel like just you trying to understand that movie and me having to explain the logistics of it is just going to make for an experience in and of itself. So that's all I'm going to leave there.
It's going to be great, man.
But yeah, it's going to be fun. So before we move on, of course, Stranger Boy, honorable mentions: Invisible Man, Soul, #Alive, Becky, your guy, Kevin James. I didn't watch that movie, but I heard that it was kind of like, I don't know, he's been doing some weird stuff lately. So he's been having a lot of fun.
I did see that one. I couldn't put it in the honorable mentions, but let's just say I enjoyed my time with it.
All right.
Maybe on like a live Q&A, I'll get into it more. But I want to keep the show rolling here as we get into our number one picks.
Our number ones, yes.
Diaz hanging. Dude,
Diaz,
On the Rocks was charming. Yeah.
It was indeed. Bill Murray.
Good to see you, man. Thanks for hanging. So,
number ones.
Number
Best
ones,
movies of the year. So this was tricky because, again, Soul had this spot, and as far as I was concerned, it was locked. But I knew I had this movie. This movie famously was delayed from the beginning of the year. This was going to be an April dump originally. And after having watched it, I'm so glad that it wasn't. But at the same time, I'm like, man, like, just what would have happened if I hadn't been able to see this movie? But I was able to. That's right. I went to a theater. I wasn't waiting for my screener. I went and saw this movie in a theater. And frankly, I was blown away by it. I think similar to a lot of the reasons why I May Destroy You was my favorite TV show of this year, Promising Young Woman was easily the best piece of cinema I saw all year. It's a movie that definitely doesn't have in mind the themes that it is embodying, but the movie is also so prescient of very, very real and still very, very relevant issues that are happening with women in general today. And for this movie to, once again, very similar to I May Destroy You, take a subject that is, again, quite traumatizing, but also just something that kind of, I feel like a lot of people, I'm not saying anybody specifically, just kind of take for granted. This movie kind of exposed and upended every single kind of relatable thing with the story of Carey Mulligan's Cassie, who was on the warpath after her best friend from college committed suicide because of sexual assault. She now takes it upon herself to kind of, for lack of a better word, lure men into potential date rape situations that end up kind of backfiring on in their faces when she reveals that obviously she is, playing it up, that she is drunk when in reality she is not. But the interesting thing to me, and why I find that this movie is just so unlike anything that I really have ever watched, is that rather than being what it so easily could have been in the hands of a lesser director, which is a really, really obvious and obnoxious message movie, this movie instead kind of takes a look inside the psyche of, quite frankly, just a demographic that still somehow, even with all of the supposed progressivism that has happened in Hollywood in the last couple of years, really shows, just kind of what it is to be like inside of this person's head, and kind of even begs the question, is there a solution to trauma? Is there a way to kind of get past this? And this movie, the brilliant thing about it is that it never once takes a stance. It never once takes a stance. Even the characters who you think are going to get away squeaky clean, they were revealed to have some dirt on them. And no character is... I don't think a movie has ever made me think about its set of characters in the way in which the movie... Because every single time they bring in a new character, 1 minute... You think the characters are going to go in one direction, and they go in the complete other. Some of the best acting moments that I've seen all year long involve some scenes with just her and some of the guys, Alfred Molina as this shady lawyer. There's this incredible scene with Connie Britton, who was the dean of college, who basically kind of pushed the case of her friend under the rug. Some scene, what's it called? She ends up forming a relationship with Bo Burnham in the movie, and even that takes a twist that you're not expected to at the end. Literally right up until the end. Which, even though I will admit, I was waiting, I'm like, okay, they're going to do this, right? They're going to do this, right? And it ends up doing it, and I know a lot of people might have been turned off by the ending, but to me, the ending, I'm like, yeah, this was the only way this could have ended as far as really selling the point of this movie home. I hope I did a good enough job of explaining it without, going too into spoilers, because, again, this is a movie that you could know absolutely nothing about going in. I truly believe that creates for the best experience overall. And it just goes to show kind of what happens when people who grow up in a world thinking that there is actual good and evil and right and wrong and that justice does prevail get kind of a rude awakening of that, and then have to come to terms with the fact that, or in this case, not the fact that, they kind of can choose to go in that direction as far as, kind of being the sole judge, jury, and executioner. But what does that actually bring, and what comes from that? It kind of takes almost the best elements that I've seen from characters like that. Again, I think of comic book characters like Judge Dredd and Rorschach are the two examples that come to my mind immediately. But Cassie's struggle in that movie is so emblematic of those types of people, but it still manages to keep it and anchor it in a real world setting, and it balances its incredible tone in a manner that, I personally just didn't know was possible to get from a movie. And the reason why this is number one is because this showed to me that movies can still have a future, that you could still tell an incredibly original story within that 2-hour time frame and still be incredibly relevant and still have themes and still, again, have your message, but not, and again, just be an incredibly engaging movie. This was the most engaged that I was with, I think, a single piece of media throughout this entire year. It's my number one favorite movie of the year, Promising Young Woman.
Wow. Well said, man. That's high praise.
Yeah.
For sure. Diaz says he loved it until the third act. He was conflicted.
Yeah, I figured. It's a very controversial third act. It's very controversial. And again, I personally think it's the only way that the movie could have ended. But that's just me. So, yeah, yeah.
Fair enough. My number one movie of the year. We're just going to get right to it, guys. Soul. I loved Soul. What can I say about this movie that I haven't said already? I think that it's going to age really well. I think that this movie is going to be a companion piece to anyone who puts their, not life on hold, but puts their heart so deeply into something that they can't let it go, and they will do whatever they can to achieve it. I really relate to this movie a lot. It sort of is an official sort of journey into what I've lived my life on, where it's like I will live and die for my passion, music, podcasting, artistic pursuit. Whereas, even if it's not good for me, I love it so much that I can't not do it. And so I really relate with our main character in this movie because of that. And, a lot of this list in 2020 was honesty. And I think this movie is so honest with the journey of a creator, and I think it's important to show to kids, because there's going to be a trade-off you're going to have to make when you love something. Is it something you can pursue because you eventually have to survive in this world and you eventually have to live, and you can't just live in La La Land forever either, no pun intended with the music reference.
Yeah, right.
But I'm just saying, you eventually have to move on. And do you choose stability, or do you choose to literally be in the trenches of life for what you love? And this movie really does a good job of showing what passion is. It really, Joe Gardner is the example of passion and loving what he does, even when it's not good for him. Because it's not good for him, really, throughout the entirety of when we meet him. He's not in a good place. He's just so in love with what he does and so hopeful for his future and believes in himself that he doesn't really see that, although it's creeping up on him as we get to see in the movie. Aside from all of the sort of, existential crises that you will encounter in life that it just answers and puts into perspective so perfectly, again, made for kids, really just I think that this is a movie that it gives me honestly hope for the world, that there's a younger generation of kids that get to grow up with this movie and get to watch it over and over again, and as they mature, the movie will mature with them. I think this is an important movie in that regard, because the message is so what we need right now, you know? Not to get
Yeah.
anywhere political or anywhere geopolitical, but it's really what we need right now.
Yeah.
And that's why this movie's number one, outside of just being an incredibly charming, fun movie. And me just being a music guy, of course, that already strikes a chord with me. That wasn't intended pun. But really what I think what this movie will do as a public service utility is why I think it has to be number one. Because I really think it's that powerful.
Yeah,
so,
this spoke to you.
Number one, Soul.
Yeah, you gave it 5. We both gave it 5 stars, right?
5 out of 5. Easiest
Hell yeah.
5 out of
Just
5.
making sure. Yeah. Oh man, not to bounce off what you said, but like, did this officially kind of finally make you understand why I love Pixar so much?
Yes.
All right.
Of course.
Good. Of course,
how could it not, right?
Right? Of course, before we move on to our combined overall top 10 list, of course, shout out to Stranger Boy. Thank you for keeping up with us the entire time. And his number one movie is Freaky. All right. The latest Freaky Friday installment, but it's horror movies. To me, the most amount of charm and enjoyment that I got out of this movie was seeing Vince Vaughn act like a 16-year-old teenage girl. And that was about that, and the kills. The kills were also really creative and really fun in this movie. Other than that, this movie was, not going to lie, a little bit disappointing for me, just personally, as far as that goes.
Didn't see it. Really like Vince Vaughn, though, and I think that's why I didn't go out of my way to see it, to preserve how much I enjoy him as an actor, because I guess I'm judging this before I see it, and that's wrong, but I can't say I'm a perfect person. So I'm judging this one before I see it, because I love Vince Vaughn, and I got to preserve that legacy. You know what I'm saying?
I feel that. I will say, this didn't ruin anything for me for Vince Vaughn, because Vince Vaughn was one of the low-key heroes of this year, because he was also not only the best part about this movie, but also the best part of another relatively bad movie, that being this latest Hangover ripoff called The Binge that came out earlier this year. That movie was whatever. Again, I'm actually really disappointed that American High put that out too in the same year they put out Big Time Adolescence, but Vince Vaughn was the best part about that movie as well. So as far as preserving the legacy of Vince Vaughn. But with that being said, let's move into the combined top 10 list. So Chris and I have 5 entries in common. So far as those automatically make it to the list, we have Soul, Mank, King of Staten Island, Nomad Land, and Invisible Man in common. So let's work our way down the list. Chris, I don't mean to flex this early, but the one thing I will say is that I do not want to budge on either Promising Young Woman or Da 5 Bloods. I'll give you Bad Education and Trial of Chicago 7. I'll understand those are personal choices, and I understand that you're not a fan of those 2 movies, but like Da 5 Bloods and Promising Young Woman to me need to be in this list.
I can give you that.
All right.
That's fine with me.
Got it. So I'll put those down, and then we'll go over your list in order to go over what other ones you should put in there. Just based on the pitch you gave alone, I definitely think Vast of Night should be in there.
Yeah, I think that deserves like a lower tier nod.
Absolutely.
Because I think when you see it, even if you don't like it, you're going to understand just how well made of a film it is. And I think you will appreciate that movie. I know you will.
Yeah, but just again, like we don't get a lot of like kind of guerrilla budget films anymore. And the fact that those movies can still be made and still be awesome is really, really engaging. So aside from those movies, what else did you have on your list?
Yeah, so I mean, again, I'm going to try and do my best to filter out the movies that I put in there that were for me, really, and more so incorporate the ones that I think show the best of the year. So with that being said, I won't be upset if you don't want to put Killer Queen in there.
Well, so we have two spots open. Let's get that one. Let's get that second and last spot filled, and then we'll see. Because I'm very, very tempted. I'm very, very tempted because you know how much I enjoyed that movie. And 2020 was a strange year to say the least.
And I will say, as much as you might want me to put On the Rocks in, I think Yes God Yes is a stronger film of a similar people-centric story. And it's tough to not want to put Bill Murray in there or Rashida Jones. She was really good in that film too. But I mean, and I know you've seen On the Rocks, so you can't speak to Yes God Yes. And I know that makes it difficult. So I'm going to ask you what you think. But personally, I think that it comes down to On the Rocks or Yes God Yes. And I do think that Yes God Yes deserves it more. But Dom, your take on
just
that?
for that one spot.
Yeah, that like last spot, right? That's what we're talking about right now, right?
Well, we
We're
have
talking
two.
about
We
the
have
last...
two. We have two spots open. We have two
We have
spots
two
open left on the
spots.
list. Yeah, we have 8 movies only so far.
Oh,
So
interesting.
we have 2
Okay.
spots. So I mean,
Well,
I didn't
perhaps...
want to throw it. I didn't want to throw another one of my movies on there. I was hesitating towards One Night in Miami, but here's what I'll say. So if we either have one of two options as far as I'm concerned. We either put Yes God Yes and and On the Rocks, or we do one of the two and then Babysitter Killer Queen. That's what I'm thinking.
I love the idea of putting
had it on
Babysitter
there. I really, really do, dude. I'm honestly tempted. Okay, so if we do, only because I haven't seen Yes God Yes, and so I don't know how
On the
well I would
Rocks
be
and
able to speak
Babysitter.
to it. On the Rocks and Babysitter, let's do it.
It has to be. It makes...
Let's fucking do it.
Sounds like it's
perfect.
the best combined options.
Yes,
And I cannot wait to watch One Night in Miami.
Yeah,
Just so you guys
dude.
know, I almost got kicked out of school today. Not for something I did, because of accounting clerical errors. So I had a lot to deal with. Didn't get to watch a movie I wanted to get in for the time being. But I do plan on watching that. Just
Good
so
to see where the
everyone knows.
future of college is going, just in America. So,
Oh, it's going great.
I think we have to agree that I think we have to agree that Babysitter Killer Queen, though, as much as I'm happy that it made the list, it's number 10. It has to be number 10.
Yeah, I mean, look, just to be on there is a feat in and of itself.
Definitely. So how does it? So right now, let me know what you think of this order just for the bottom. I've got Babysitter Killer Queen at 10, On the Rocks at 9, and Vast at Night at 8.
That's what I would do.
All right,
So
got it.
we got it. Lock it in, man.
Yeah,
Bottom
so
3.
those are
Done.
locked in for
Bam.
the bottom 3. So
Emerald,
number
bam.
7, you want to do Five Bloods at 7?
If that's where you feel it should go.
Yeah, only because you haven't seen it. So, and like I said, the movie, as much as I did enjoy it, and as much as I did boost it up a lot of spots, it still, to me, had problems. That second half I've gone on ad nauseum about how it's a little bit problematic. So I'm fine with Five Bloods at 7.
Now, real quick, before we lock that in at 7, just because I think with Chadwick obviously leaving us too soon,
Yes.
does that feel right at number 7 for you? I'm trusting your judgment here.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to guilt you into putting it higher.
No,
I'm just saying,
you're right, because I didn't think
that,
about but I didn't think about that because again, I famously said that Chadwick, to me, as good as Delroy was, Chadwick was the best part about this movie. Like, you want to talk about Dion Waiters coming in, shooting threes for all of the 3 scenes that he has in the whole movie, and like again, the fact that his cancer diagnosis retroactive, it's a weird because it's one of those, it's almost like a Dark Knight situation where the cancer diagnosis and the knowledge of what happened and the fact that he died so shortly after the movie came out really does kind of retroactively shift the performance and make it almost even better. But with that being said, I don't personally know if that reflects on the movie itself.
Right, and
it
that's how
might
we have to
just
look
be
at
the
it as
one
critics.
performance. That's the thing. You know?
Okay,
Because
fair enough.
ultimately, that incredible moment between Chadwick and Delroy is one scene amidst a very problematic last half hour to me. So that's the only kind of caveat that I'll say as far as keeping it that low.
Sorry if I put you on the spot there. I just felt
No. It's all good. It's all good.
And
Yeah,
maybe
Invisible.
that's my lack of knowledge not having seen it.
Yeah, no, it's all good. So you wanted to put Invisible Man at 6?
Feels right.
All right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, Invisible Man at 6. That way, our top 5. Let's just figure this out as far as rearrangement goes. We have Promising Young Woman, Nomadland, King of Staten Island, Mank, and Soul. Wow, that's
me,
tough.
I mean, I think
Soul is number 1. It has to be number 1.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously. I think I'm willing to put Promising Young Woman at number 2.
Yes.
I'm willing to put King of Staten Island at number 3.
All right.
And I'm willing to put Nomadland at number 4, even though I hate to put Mank at 5. What's your thoughts on all that?
I am fully in favor of all of that, and I can justify every single one of those choices. Again, because this is our list, and it comes down to personal enjoyment overall, despite how incredibly made the films were.
Let me tell the viewers, I did watch Promising Young Woman. It's just I literally watched it 2 nights ago.
Yeah.
I have to sit with it. These movies this year really made you think. And let me just say this. I love what it says about Hollywood and their hypocrisy.
Yeah,
I hate it because it exists, and I hate that the hypocrisy is a real thing, but I love that someone's brave enough to freaking talk about it, you know?
And the crazy thing about this is just because I wanted to nerd out with you a little bit because we literally had no chances to talk about this movie before this podcast, which is that the director, Emerald Fennell, she's an actress and showrunner. She actually starred in this most recent season of The Crown and was the showrunner for Killing Eve Season 2. is that she never kind of envisioned this as she only kind of envisioned this as like a revenge movie, and then kind of the theme just kind of played itself out, and then just based on like the when it came out, like it ended up kind of taking on this whole secondary life that she didn't even realize that it kind of would, which to me is the best element of the movie.
So are you saying because of the time that it was released in, it sort of has taken different meanings than the original intent?
That's
just
exactly what I'm saying.
Because of the state that we're in movies
That's exactly
and Hollywood.
Like I listened to
That's something.
I listened to an interview with her, and she said that, like, when obviously, again, it's the same filmmaker response that she's going to give to everything, which is, again, it's like, no, when I was making it, I was concerned with making the best movie possible. But, like, again, it's common knowledge, the fact that this is shit that women have to go through, like, every single day. So the fact that it's, like, never gonna, like, not gonna be on their minds is inherently just, you know, kind of ridiculous as far as, like, you know, just, like, the fact that, like, oh, definitely, that was not at all on her mind. When
she
like,
embraces that,
she
essentially,
embraces
what
it.
the culture has attributed to it.
Exactly. Like
Wow, that makes it so much stronger too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's another one of those films like Nomadland where it sucks that this movie had to be made, but I'm glad someone had the courage. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
and for it to be that's the thing I don't want to undersell, is that as dark as this movie gets, this movie is still entertaining as hell, and it's funny too. Like, this movie was a comedy, a dark comedy at the least, but a comedy, and
performances are great.
Yep.
The directing's really. You said it was her directorial debut.
Her directorial debut.
Really well done. Would not have guessed that. Seems like a veteran. Yeah, it's a great film.
Yeah.
And it's
really,
crazy
really
to me that you're telling me that there's so much there that wasn't intended, but it just, if the shoe fits, wear it, I suppose.
Yeah, right? Again,
that's why it's number 2 for me. Like, I had to speak about it at some point in time, but I did not want to disservice any of the movies, and also not potentially put that as high as it should be, or maybe, you know, I could not, as a critic who respects himself, I could not put a movie I had just seen in the list because of how heavy it is. It was the same thing
with Devs when you weren't fully finished with Devs. You were like, yeah, I could binge this all in a night, or I could let it sit and
one more episode left,
get the full effect. Exactly. Yeah.
It's going good so far.
Anyways, with that being said, you want to read it down?
Please do, man.
Let's read it down. So the official Talkin' TV Top 10 Best Movies of 2020 combined list is number 10, The Babysitter, Killer Queen. Number 9, On the Rocks. Number 8, The Vast of Night. Number 7, Da 5 Bloods. Number 6, The Invisible Man. Number 5, Mank. Number 4, Nomad Land. Number 3, The King of Staten Island. Number 2, Promising Young Woman. And number 1, Soul. I don't know about you, but that's a pretty dope list as far as I'm concerned. That for a movie that pretty much sucked for a year that pretty much sucked overall when it came to movies and just life in general. Those are some pretty awesome movies, and I'm glad that we were able to put together this list overall. So, people, with that being said, thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of Talkin' TV. Thank you for putting up with us with all of these lists that we've been putting out recently. Look, we have fun with lists. Top 10 lists are fun to do. They really are. Just in addition to YouTube, the YouTube algorithm. Really,
some of my favorite
liking
episodes, honestly.
Absolutely. I love going back and listening to these episodes. They're really great. It's really, really awesome. It's so much fun. Next week, we are finally getting back to some regularly scheduled content with a little bit of a shift. Next week, we'll kind of be doing like a look forward into like what media we're going to get this year, or in this case, kind of what we hope to get this year, because in case you guys haven't been listening to the news, the delays are already starting again. So that's just one of many things. That's one of many things that we'll have to talk about next week. We'll be talking about some of the upcoming movies and TV shows that have been announced that will hopefully come out this year. We'll see.
Certain monster movie trailer, maybe?
Oh, maybe. We'll definitely be talking about a particularly gigantic trailer that dropped yesterday, because, oh man, dude. Yeah, I gotta save it. I've already been talking about everyone. I know. But oh man. Just when we thought we were out, they pull us back in.
Right back in.
Because you've got an incredible story as far as the last movie in that franchise goes that you better tell for next week's podcast.
Oh, it's gonna be fun as
it's gonna be so much fun. Thank you guys once again for tuning in again. Thank you for helping us round off and kind of come to terms with the experience that was 2020 overall. For as many shitty, awful times, we were still able to get, again, a lot of good times out of it. We were able to get the YouTube channel going in the direction that we wanted it to, and that is, of course, all thanks to you guys overall. So everybody that was in the chat, Stranger Boy, Diaz, what's it called? Basic Entertainment for stopping by. Again, you
and
guys
all the rest of our regulars, man. We appreciate and love you guys so much. Almost at 225 subscribers. Can you believe it? 3 weeks ago, we celebrated 200. 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks. We gained, what is that, like 10, 15 subscribers since then? 25, 20? Just
almost
about?
25, man. I'm humbled, really.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Oh man, that was yeah, that's just such an honor and a blessing. Again, onward and upward is the only direction as far as I'm concerned, even throughout what the future holds, you know? So again, click the subscribe button, click the like button, leave a comment. Let us know, obviously. But if you didn't get a chance, if you're tuning in later to this video or you're listening to it on audio only on when this goes up on Wednesday, leave it in the comments. Let us know what your favorite top 10 favorite movies of 2020, if you were even able to see that many movies in 2020. It's understandable if you weren't, but the good news is that a lot of these movies that we said are available on streaming services or for rent, so I would highly recommend watching almost all of these movies, if not all of them, because they're all, for the most part, really, really enjoyable movies in one way or another. Chris, do you have anything that you want to let the people know about as far as kind of maybe upcoming content, maybe stuff that you've got going on with your own personal stuff, you know, as far as that goes?
Yeah, I do. I appreciate that, Dom. Before we get off of our show, though, because I always want to put our show first and foremost, follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Talkin TV Podcast. Right down there. We love to talk, guys. If for some reason you miss us on a live and you don't want to, you want an instant communication, we're pretty active on there. We can have an instant conversation with you for the most part over on Instagram or Facebook. Find us, chat with us. We'd love to hear from you. Anyways, yeah, I'm putting out music again this year. It's actually been going really well. Yeah. Dom has been hearing some of it, and he's been giving me some really cool ways to approach it. I'm kind of reinventing myself as a musician, sort of kicking some years upon years of bad habits, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it. Honestly, I think it's I like it a lot, and my goal was to write songs that make me happy, and I think in turn that will, if it's your style, I think you'll enjoy it. So you can follow me at Christian Evanko. First and last name is in the description of this video. EVANKO on Instagram and Facebook. I guess I'm on Twitter, although I'm not that active on Twitter. So Instagram or Facebook are going to be your best ways. It's going to be coming out in the middle of the year, Dom. I appreciate you throwing that to me. And I can't wait to give you guys these songs. They're going to be as much for you as they are for me. So I just hope you enjoy it. Thanks,
guys.
Dom.
Look, I've been saying this from the beginning that Chris is probably one of the most talented, if not the most talented musician that I know personally. And if you guys have not gotten a chance to listen to any of his previous music, you absolutely should. It's all on Spotify under your name, I'm guessing.
Thanks, man. Yeah, under my name. We can link it in the description of this video.
Awesome.
And Dom, what about you, man? I know you write scripts. Where can they find
again,
you?
My focus is entirely on this channel right now. I don't really have anything kind of extra on my own going on. Again, just subscribe to this channel. That would be doing me the biggest favor. As far as solo content, Chris and Andrew are going live tomorrow in order to discuss some video game stuff on No NPCs. Make sure you guys tune into that. They're going to be talking some Cyberpunk. They're going to be talking some Star Wars video games, a bunch of other stuff that I am largely familiar with, but only really know about because of its kind of iconography in the news. And of course, this Friday we'll be coming back to recap the latest episode of WandaVision. And of course, we've got new content coming out as always on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So be sure to stay tuned to that. Follow our Instagram and Facebook at Talkin TV Podcast. That way you guys can stay updated and notified with all of our new content that we've got coming out. We've got so much still planned for this year, for the rest of this year. Season 3 is only getting started. And with that being said, Chris, you have anything left you want to leave the people with?
No, this was awesome, guys. Love that you guys counted lists down with us in the chat. I love doing this show so much. Thank you. And I'm pretty sure Dom has a final message for you guys here tonight.
I mean, you guys know at this point, but still, I'm going to say it from the beginning. I'm going to keep saying it until the end of time. Hopefully, I'll still be podcasting even long into on my deathbed. Watch more fucking movies, people, and TV. We'll see you guys next week. We out.